Imagine having the chance to sign Kylian Mbappe as a 12-year-old and turning him down. Well, that's what one Premier League club did in 2011. Phillipe Auclair tells the story and so much more in his new book, The Mbappe Project. Auclair dives into the life of the World Cup winner and one of the most fearsome marksmen of the modern era. He discusses his early struggles at Monaco, a long unpaid debt at PSG, and how his parents shaped his journey to Real Madrid. In this video, I'll tell you about the main themes in the book and tell you why I wasn't a huge fan. So before we start, I also have book reviews around the likes of Erling Haaland and Lionel Messi, so I'd really love to hear your thoughts on those as well, so please do watch those too. Right, let's get started, shall we? Well before Mbappe was lusted after by the likes of Sevilla, Real Madrid and pretty much any other institution who kicked a spherical object around, Mbappe was born in the rough streets of Bondy, 10k from the heart of Paris. Its unemployment rate was double the French average, and the area was rife with crime and poverty. Before the World Cup in 2022, a body was pulled out of a river in Bondy, which actually sat below a night-commissioned mural of Mbappe. Equally as harrowing, in 2005, just a few kilometres from Bondy, the teenagers Zayed Benna and Bouna Traoré died after being electrocuted in an electricity substation. This triggered riots across the area as many felt that the emergency services were slow to react. So although Mbappe grew up in a really fractured area, he did have a sporting background right from birth, as his father Wilfred was a second division footballer and his mother Faiza was a handball player. And that heritage gave Mbappe all the impetus he needed to be a success. He ditched his studies, focused on football and slept in a bedroom covered in posters of Cristiano Ronaldo. Goodness me, imagine being a kid when Ronaldo was playing, that makes you feel old, doesn't it? Added to his footballing parentage was his adopted brother, Jirez Kembo Okoko, who made a promising start to his career at Rennes before his career petered out thanks to a financially motivated move to Al Ain in the United Arab Emirates. And Auclair does devote quite a lot of copy to Kembo Okoko, who he really paints as someone who had quite a lot of talent but perhaps didn't have the mindset to get to that absolute highest level like Mbappe has. So when considering grabbing the cash, I think Kembo Okoko should have looked at the stories of Oscar, Jackson Martinez and Asamoah Gyan, who were all finished at the highest level after moving to Asia. That said, Mbappe was in no danger of faltering like those three. As a kid, his family fielded advances from the likes of Rennes, Caen and one Premier League club, who in fact thought Mbappe wasn't quite all he was cracked up to be. The Premier League club who pursued Mbappe was actually Chelsea, whose youth development officer Jim Fraser said he wanted to see more hunger from the youngster. This is up there with one of football's biggest ever mistakes. It's a little bit like Alan Hansen saying that you'll never win anything with kids. Mbappe spent a week with Chelsea and his parents were less than impressed with Fraser's feedback. In fact, Fraser told Chelsea that they wouldn't be coming back for a retrial as Chelsea requested, and she said that in the future Chelsea would need to pay around 50 million for Mbappe's services. That would have been a British transfer record fee at the time, which Chelsea did break that year when they bought Fernando Torres for 50 million. So if Chelsea did buy Mbappe, what would have happened? Well, he would have probably been coming through in the 2016-2017 season when Chelsea actually won the Premier League for the 5th time and they scored an astronomical 93 points. It would have been really interesting to see how he would have linked up with the likes of Pedro, Hazard, Diego Costa, who all three of those were just immense creative outlets for the Blues at the time. Now, with Chelsea in the rearview mirror, as Auclair tells us, it was actually Monaco who captured the Frenchman in 2013. As Monaco benefited from Dimitri Ribolovlev's riches, he was paid a signing-on fee of 400k. However, as Mbappe's parents held all the cards in his project to eventually reach Real Madrid, they kept his feet on the ground and looked after his money. His dad Wilfred told Mbappe that he was only paid 15k for a signing on fee. By this time, Mbappe's parents and handlers knew that he was something special and should be fast-tracked to the Monaco first team. That said, Bruno Irla was quite stubborn and kept him in the reserves of the under-17s. Fighting back against Monaco, Wilfred and Fazer showed the power they had when they told L'Équipe that in the January 2017 transfer window, they would look at options for a move for Mbappe. So I think in this book, Auclair does focus on like the kind of business and marketing side of Mbappe a bit too much. I wasn't really too interested in that, but he gives some really good insight into his parents, who always had their arm around their son's shoulders and guided him in the right direction. After the L'Équipe story broke, he was actually a regular starter. Funny that. And he scored 14 goals in the second half of the 2016-2017 Ligue 1 season as Monaco won the title. So with one French title under wraps, Mbappe's journey to Real Madrid was about to shift up a gear. Auclair writes that Mbappe's next step was to join the Parisian giants PSG in August 2017. He initially joined on a season-long loan for the purposes of PSG's accounting, and having listened to Auclair just railing against the likes of FIFA and Gianni Infantino on the Football Weekly podcast by The Guardian, it's no surprise that he really calls out PSG a couple of times in the book. He asks whether or not the Qataris bought PSG to really grease the wheels as they eventually looked to host the World Cup, which they did in 2022. As you can imagine, Mbappe entered a chaotic environment as PSG were actually dumped out of the Champions League by Manchester United in 2019. And although Mbappe and Neymar formed a real tandem offense as the Parisians won 3 Ligue 1 titles between 2018 and 2020, Mbappe's entourage grew tired of Neymar's constant partying. They thought Neymar was a child, whereas Mbappe had never really been able to be a child. Although Mbappe won the Golden Boot in Ligue 1 6 consecutive times, he then refused to sign a new contract, and in 2024, PSG started war with their star striker and withheld his wages for 3 months. Mbappe lodged a criminal complaint in 2025, and PSG then sued their player for reputational damage, although they eventually did pay their debt. So despite immense success in Ligue 1, Mbappe left PSG under a cloud due to inner wranglings at the club and their absolute inability to win that elusive Champions League. As we know, he finally joined Real Madrid in the summer of 2024. It was there that he became the second youngest player to reach 50 Champions League goals after Lionel Messi. He also scored 31 La Liga goals in his first term, a record for a newcomer to Real Madrid. That said, given Real Madrid's divine right to success, they will not settle for 3 consecutive seasons now without a La Liga title. To sum up, although I thought this was beautifully written, there was just a lot of content here that I was just a little bit ambivalent towards. Auclair writes quite extensively about how Mbappe was a little bit of a maverick for having his parents look after his career and really kind of ignoring the wider football agents and that kind of thing. And for me, this just wasn't really something I was that interested in. I just wasn't that bothered by it. There was a lot of information about Mbappe's business interests and his investments, which, although adds a lot of context to the player, again, it just didn't really make me feel anything. I just wasn't that bothered about it, to be honest. There's also a funny moment when Auclair claims that Mbappe is the first superstar to really rise with social media, and I'm just not sure that's true. So I was on Facebook in 2008 and Neymar hadn't even made his debut for Santos then. So I'm just not sure how much social media really helped to make Mbappe. I think whatever era he came up in, he would have been such a marketable person. I did feel like the book faltered a little bit in the final third, but it was interesting to read about how Emmanuel Macron really latched onto Mbappe, especially after France lost in the 2022 World Cup final. I remember when Macron was on the pitch trying to console Mbappe, and it was just really, really odd. It was a little bit like, I don't know if you saw where the chef Salt Bay also came onto the pitch and was celebrating with the players. And it's kind of just like, what are you doing? It's just so random for you to just come onto the pitch. He was just kind of plonked in the middle of Argentina and Messi's special moment. So yes, Auclair is a brilliant writer and a fantastic investigative journalist, but I just didn't really enjoy this book that much. I did enjoy his book about Eric Cantona, which I would recommend you read as well. So yeah, that pretty much sums up my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the World Cup. Best of luck to your team and see you soon.